Good morning. So today in the You Have a God Who Can Relate series, we're gonna kind of redo the He Was Criticized, and we're gonna add in People Spread Lies about him, because I feel like these two go together. I feel like everybody has been criticized and everyone has had lies spread about them. And this really ties into experiences that I personally had 2 years ago when I was going through the things that I was going through. And when I went through and I reread the New Testament, it actually gave me so much comfort to know that I had a God who could relate. I had a God who understood what I had been through and could relate to it, but also who gave me an example of how to walk through things. Did I walk through things like that in that time and in that moment? No. I was still trying to get closer to God while struggling with PTSD at the time and depression. I was still very suicidal at the time. I was really struggling, but as I kept reading and kept reading and kept reading these scriptures, not these specific scriptures, but the New Testament in general, I found so much comfort and peace knowing that Paul was criticized and Jesus was criticized and Peter was criticized. Paul was criticized by all kinds of people, including people that churches he built, because he was an apostle. He went places and he started up these churches and then handed them over to other people and went and started another church somewhere else. And the very churches that he helped to build would criticize him. Peter was criticized by the Jews for going to the Gentiles, because for the Jews, they were not supposed to do that. But Peter had a vision, and God had told him, do not call unclean what I have cleansed. And he was sent to the Gentiles' home, and they received the gift of speaking in tongues after they were saved. And it was one of those things where, as I was reading through this, I realized Jesus was criticized and he was lied about. Peter was criticized and he was lied about. The Jewish leaders were saying these men are criminals, they're liars, they believe in this Jesus fellow and it didn't really happen. But if it didn't really happen, then why were they trying to kill people about it? If it didn't really happen, then why was it such a big deal that they killed these disciples of Jesus rather than let them continue to spread the word about Jesus? And so if you've ever been criticized, if you've ever been lied about, it's kind of nice to know that we're in good company with Jesus, with Peter, with Paul, with the disciples that went around and shared the gospel, that we're not the only ones to have experienced this. But while we're not the only people to experience this, it's also good to remember that Jesus set the example of how we're supposed to react when people criticize us or when people lie about us. So in the he was criticized portion, we're going to go to Matthew 9 through 12. And it says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. Follow me and be my disciple, Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. Later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. But when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? When Jesus heard this, he said, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. It just goes to show that even if you're doing something that's right, people are going to criticize you. If you're doing something that's wrong, people are really going to criticize you. They were criticizing Matthew because Matthew was a tax collector. And if you don't know much about the Bible or the history of this time, then you think, like when we file taxes, and it's not the same, because at this time, these people were skimming from the people. So not only did they collect the taxes, but then they would hike them up and collect even more to line their own pockets. It was not a job that was looked well upon, because most people understood that they were stealing from the people. So we're going to go to Matthew 11, 16, and 19. Okay. And this is Jesus talking about John the Baptist and himself. The Pharisees complained about John the Baptist. They criticized him because of who he was and how he dressed and all these things. And they criticized Jesus because he ate with sinners and he talked to tax collectors and people who had disreputable reputations. The religious leaders of that time were not super different from some religious leaders of this time. I'm sure we have all met people who are ministers, who think of people who have lived rougher lives as being beneath them. I know that I have. I would like to say that I feel like it's not super common. I feel like most ministers that I have met are so loving and so kind and so gracious, no matter what kind of lifestyle somebody has lived. But I have met ministers in my life that looked down on people because of the lifestyle a person had lived. And it is not a good look. It is something that is embarrassing to see as a believer, because we are supposed to be God's hands and feet on the earth. And to see somebody who looks down on God's people, because even if you're not saved, God created you, God made you. Ministers are not supposed to look down on God's creation. That's not their purpose. Their purpose is to serve as Jesus served. And so Jesus is addressing them because they have criticized John, because nothing he did was good enough. And he is criticizing that, or not criticizing them, but addressing their criticism of himself and John the Baptist being his cousin, saying, John couldn't make you happy, and I couldn't make you happy, and you will criticize no matter what, because in modern terms, we're not Nutella. We can't make everybody happy. So let me read it. To what can I compare this generation? It is like children playing a game in the public square. They complain to their friends. We played wedding songs and you didn't dance. So we played funeral songs and you didn't mourn. For John didn't spend his time eating and drinking, and you say he's possessed by a demon. The Son of Man, on the other hand, feasts and drinks, and you say he is a glutton and a drunkard, and a friend of tax collectors and other sinners, but wisdom is shown to be right by its results. And what this is referring to is Jesus and John were called differently. They were not called to do the same thing. And so often we will look at how someone else lives their life and judge it and criticize it. And the funny part is you're not God. And God didn't make that person to be like you for a reason, because they are not called to the same thing. It's like My brother Cameron and I are very different. I have tattoos and piercings. My brother has no tattoos, no piercings. He's never drank. He's never smoked. I, in my past, have drank and smoked. I've done drugs. I'm not proud of that. Like, not heavy drugs, but still drugs. And I'm not proud of that. And it's one of those things where my husband and I lived together before we were married. My brother Cameron and his wife did not live together before they were married. While I have sinned and fallen short, I have come back to God and I live for God. My brother Cameron has also sinned in his life and fallen short, but in different ways. But he serves God. But we are created similar because we have the same parents, but differently. We are called to serve in different ways. And the reason that I give our lifestyles as examples is because I've gone through certain things in my life. I'm going to be called maybe to minister to people who are going through similar things in their life, because I know what it's like to be there. I know what it is, and I can have compassion and empathy for it, and I can relate to it, and I can minister to it. My brother Cameron has gone through different things and different experiences that I can't relate to, that I can't minister to, because I don't understand those things. Not that I don't have empathy, not that I can't be compassionate, but I don't understand, just like he won't understand some things because he didn't walk through it. So while we're both called to serve God, because of our life experience, the personality differences, the things that we do that are different. Like, I am a stay-at-home mom right now, and I was a custodian before this because my brother has gone to college and served in the church. We both have lived different kinds of lives. Neither one is better than the other at all, but they are vastly different lifestyles and lives. And so we are called, because of who we are personality-wise and our experience, to serve different people in different areas. We're both called by the same God. We're both saved by the same God. But we are called in different ways. But too often, we see someone who is different from us and think that those differences are wrong and should change to be more like us. I've met so many people that saw me and all my rough around the edge personality issues. I am, if you've ever met me, an extremely blunt person. And I've met many people who wanted me to be less blunt, less forward, less bold with my word choices. And I wasn't created to be them. God created me to be me. And by trying to change myself for another person, I would actually be disobeying God, because unless God tells me to change, God created me with that thing to be that way, to reach certain people. If I alter myself for people, that is wrong, unless God tells me to. And so Jesus is saying, but wisdom is shown to be right by its results, saying, if God called me to be who I am, and I do what God has called me to do, it doesn't matter what other people say. God has called me to this thing. Cameron is not called to be Carissa. Carissa is not called to be Cameron. And the reason I use this example is because I am the oldest out of 4. My brother is the youngest out of 4. And I'm a high school dropout. He is a college graduate. Like, he is an ordained minister. I'm not. But we both share the gospel. We are both called of God. But neither one of us is less called or more called than the other. We are called differently. And the wisdom is in obeying God. The results are found in the obedience to God and being who God has created us to be. Not being like our dad or being like our mom or trying to be more like our brother Christian or our sister Chloe. They are also called, but they are called even more differently. Like, I would venture to say that my brother Christian is very called to preteen ministry with his wife Anna. They love it. And I am not called to preteen ministry. I can guarantee it, because I see someone who is in those preteen years and I'm like, okay, like, I can be polite, I can be kind, and I can be good, and I can be loving, but I'm like, I need a timeout now. I need a break. This is not. And whereas my brother Cameron, he works with the college age and up, the young adult era, age, if you would qualify it as that, and he does that amazingly. My sister Chloe is very, very called to children, and she is really amazing with young kids, like, just so awesome. And I do great with adults and teens, like 15, 16, 17, 18, teens. I don't know why. Or older adults in their 50s and up. Like, I either do well with teens or I do really well with elder people. And then people my own age, sometimes I'm like, I'm trying, but I feel really clunky with people my own age, which is so funny. But because I kind of am an old soul, but I enjoy the bluntness of teenagers and I'm just going to ask this question kind of attitude that teenagers have, because I still very much have that. But I enjoy being with elder people because they have so much wisdom, so much life experience. And I want to learn from that so desperately. And I really, unless somebody else who is my age is also in this period of like, I want to learn from people who are older than me, I kind of have a hard time connecting, because there are a lot of people in my age group that are like just content to be about themselves and content to live their life for themselves. And they don't really think about how they can connect or relate with people older than them. There's a whole lot of very selfish people in my generation, and it's kind of heartbreaking. And in the church, it's better, but it's definitely like a heartbreaking thing to see that there's this whole generation of people that are just about that party lifestyle, when there's just so much more to life than partying. And so I think that we are missing out on the wisdom of our elders in some ways, and they're only with us for so long before they're not with us anymore. And I think that it's important to take advantage of that. But that is just a little bit of rant for me. But again, I love that Jesus is saying, John wasn't called to be me, and I wasn't called to be John. And we can't make you happy because you want us to be like you, and we're not called to be like you. We're called to be what God has created us to be. And I think that very often there is that kind of criticism in the church. Now we're going to jump over to Matthew 12, 9 through 14. Let me find it. And how much more valuable is a person than a sheep? Is that right? Oh, okay. So in this, I don't know if it actually talks about, okay, well, it talks about how they scheme to kill him. But in other versions of this, so Jesus heals on the Sabbath, and he does this more than once. At one point, he heals a woman on the Sabbath. At one point, he heals a man on the Sabbath. And so in this version, it doesn't talk about how they criticize him. It talks about how they plot to kill him. But in other versions of these Sabbath stories, they criticize him. And they talk about how he's doing things wrong because they weren't supposed to work in the Sabbath. But healing somebody is not work. For God, that is something that is easy. But they were, so this is a really interesting thing because my children and I have just read through Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. And if you have ever read those books, you understand why my eyes got so big. Because it is the Exodus from Egypt. It is the instructions on how to build the tabernacle and the instructions on all their sacrifices. And the reason that I'm having my children read these things with me is because unless you've read these things, you don't understand how far away from what God told them to do they got. Because this no working on the Sabbath thing, they took it to a whole different level and they just started adding in their own rules to things and making it a religious dead experience. There is a religious relational experience that you can have with God. I don't like the word religious because I feel like it doesn't really, while I have faith, I feel like it doesn't explain the relationship portion of what I also have with God. But I have faith in God, but I also have relationship with God. These people did not have relationship with God. They had religious law, and law tells you all the things you did wrong, whereas relationship tells you all the things that you did wrong and how you can make it right and how you can get closer to God. And so that is the difference kind of between the old covenant and the new covenant. God created and gave them these laws to separate them from all the other people around them that were doing things like murdering their children and sacrificing them to the false idols and gods of that time. Because literally there were all the laws and the 10 commandments that were given in the Bible were to help them be separate people from the people around them who were doing awful, terrible things. Also, it was meant to protect them. Like God tells them so many times to rest on the Sabbath day, and he takes the Sabbath rest so seriously. But you have to remember that these were a people that were just coming out of slavery, and if you understand that they were just coming out of slavery, then you might understand that they did not know how to rest. And so part of this was God teaching them how to rest, how to take care of themselves, because they had been enslaved. Self-care was not a thing. And God gave them structures and rules and laws so that they could see their sin and understand what sin was, to separate themselves from other people, and to care for themselves and their people, to make sure that nobody was abusing their slaves or their servants or their wives or their children, to make sure that people were being held accountable. Some of these things sound so serious and so overly strict, but these were people coming from slavery where they were whipped to death at times, or abused or beaten or forced to work without rest. And God was saying, no, this is not the kind of people, you're not going to come out of slavery and then live like the Egyptians lived. I am creating a separate people. And so this whole passage about, I'm not going to read it because it's not what I was looking for, but I am going to explain it. This whole thing about should somebody be healed on the Sabbath day was them taking what God had placed so that they would rest, so that they would respect their bodies, respect the land, respect the day of God, and just spend that time with him. It was taken too far the wrong way. And Jesus is so disappointed anytime you read about Jesus healing on the Sabbath in the New Testament. You can see his disappointment in their twisting of something that God gave them that was meant to be for them and for him, to have relationship together on this day so that they would rest, so that they would know what rest even was, having come out of slavery. And instead they twisted it and manipulated it into something that they could use to manipulate and control others, which was wrong and evil. We are going into the people spread lies about him part. So we're still in Matthew 12, but we're going to go to 22 through 30. Then a demon-possessed man who was blind and couldn't speak was brought to Jesus, and he healed the man so he could both speak and see. The crowd was amazed and asked, "Could it be that Jesus is the son of David, the Messiah?" But when the Pharisees heard about the miracle, they said, "No wonder he can cast out demons. He gets his power from Satan, the prince of demons." Jesus knew their thoughts and replied, "Any kingdom divided by civil war is doomed. A town or a family splintered by feuding will fall apart. And if Satan is casting out Satan, he is divided and fighting against himself. His own kingdom will not survive. And if I am empowered by Satan, what about your own exorcists? They cast out demons too, so they will condemn you for what you have said. But if I am casting out demons by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God has arrived among you. For who is powerful enough to enter the house of a strong man and plunder his goods? Only someone even stronger. Someone who could tie him up and then plunder his house. Anyone who isn't with me opposes me, and anyone who isn't working with me is actually working against me. Jesus knew that they knew he wasn't demon-possessed, and he called them out on it. He was calling out their lie about him because, like he said, they had exorcists. They knew that that wasn't what it was and that they were speaking out of jealousy. So often, the lies that people tell, they come from a place of jealousy. And if you've ever told a lie, you know that it can either be out of self-preservation or it can be out of jealousy. And if you've lied, I'm not condemning you because everybody has lied at some point or another. Most of my lies were out of self-preservation. I won't lie about that. But because I don't get lying out of jealousy. But that's my person. I'm a really literal person. But I know that people lie out of jealousy, and they lie out of this fear that, like, they'll lose attention or notability. We see it all the times in politics where people lie about each other and say things that aren't true because, well, they're going to follow the other guy. And it's one of those things where we see people lie out of self-preservation because I don't want to get in trouble, or well, what if they follow this ministry and not mine? What's going to happen? And so, like, you'll see people lie a lot. Those are just some examples that I could think of off the top of my head. And so Jesus knew they're lying out of fear that the people would stop following them and start following Jesus, but also lying out of jealousy. And he called them out on it. And that's the thing, is that the lies that we tell are so, they're actually a big deal. But when people tell lies about us, how we handle that is also a big deal. I can actually think of an instance recently that happened to me, not really, really recently. But when I was in cosmetology school, there was a girl that I went to school with, and I've kind of told the story, but not this part because I'm a little embarrassed of how I handled it. I'm not going to lie. But she was a liar. We all knew she was a liar. She would make up stories that weren't true because she never left high school. She wanted to be the popular girl in school, but we're all grown adults. And so her lies were so ridiculous that you would know she was lying. And it was very 15, 16-year-old type stuff to lie about. It was stuff that was just crazy. And I saw early on, because I am a people watcher, that she would lie about things that were not important, things that didn't make sense to lie about, like things that she said she was good at or did that, like, she then would later on say, oh, I never did anything. Like, she made a joke one time about how, like, she had never cheerleaded. And then we had a girl that did cheer for a really long time that came to the school, and all of a sudden she had been a cheerleader, even though she had told us she had never been a cheerleader before. And so, like, there was a lot of little things like that. And then there was fights that she made up between her and someone else. Nothing had happened, nothing had gone wrong, but all of a sudden they were in a fight and the other person was confused why they were fighting, because nothing to fight over had happened. And so because I saw this behavior in her early on, while I was polite to her, I also distanced myself from her, because I don't do drama. If you know me at all, you know that, like, I will not participate in your drama. I will pray for you, I will be kind, and I will be polite, but if you come into my life and you cause any kind of drama, I will cut you out, not because I don't love you in Christ, but because I will not do drama. I just don't do drama. Never have, never will. I don't like drama. Especially not high school type drama. I never did it in high school. I put the kibosh on that anytime anyone tried to bring that garbage into my life. Not interested. But one day I came in, I told her she looked really pretty that day. I told her hair looked really nice. She just changed it because we're in cosmetology school. We are changing our hair all the time in cosmetology school. That is true. That is not a lie. And then I walked off and I had a client and I didn't talk to her for the rest of the night. Partway through the night, one of our classmates comes to me and my friend and says, so-and-so is saying that you, me, and your friend that was standing next to me, we're both doing hair next to each other because we had clients that night. And so we're standing next to each other all night, kind of talking to each other. And she says that me, her, and my friend who's standing next to me have all been gossiping about her and saying these things about her. And I'm not gonna lie, I got mad. I got really mad because not only had I not said anything, but I had even complimented her that night. And so I got really upset. And my two classmates, my friend and this other classmate, they confronted her themselves and tried to talk to her about the things that she had made up. And she just continued to lie. And at one point, my friend who had been standing next to her another day actually pulled her aside and confronted her, and she cried so that she could get attention and have people feel sympathy for her because she was upset she got caught in her lie. And I, knowing my temper, avoided her for a really long time until one day she came up to me while I was doing work in school and tried to talk to me. And I did not handle it well. I blew up and I was really mean and blunt and was more or less like, you lied about me. We're not friends. We've never been friends. We're never going to be friends. And I don't want to talk to you because I was fine with you. We were never going to be friends, but we got along just fine enough. And now you've lied about me and I'm done. Don't talk to me. And I was not quiet. I startled and kind of scared the girl that was sitting next to me that was in the middle of this, because of course she did it publicly to cause more drama. And the only reason I'm telling this story is because this is not how you handle when somebody has lied about you. What I should have said is, I know you lied about me and you were wrong to lie about me, but I forgive you. While I don't want to be friends with you, I forgive you for lying about me, but like, I'm not interested in being friends. And just walked away. But I let my temper get me, and I did not handle it well. or like God would have wanted me to handle it. And I am embarrassed to say that. But I walked over to my friend and she was like, well, that was interesting because if you've ever met me, it takes a lot for me to get mad. So when people see me get mad, they're kind of surprised at how mad I am. But because it takes longer for me to get mad like that, to be confrontational, it's kind of like, oh, and it's like, yeah, I have a temper. I've been working really hard for a really long time to control it. So I was very proud of myself for controlling it so long, but I was very embarrassed at how I did not handle that well. The things that Jesus being lied about here, he confronts them, but he tells the truth. He doesn't get up in their faces. He doesn't yell at them. He just tells them the truth in love, because when you tell somebody the truth, that is love. But there are better ways to do it than how I handled it. And that's why I gave the example, because I wanted you to see an example of how we handle things so often, and then how Jesus handles things. There are better ways to handle lies that people spread about you, and that is the thing that we need to realize, is that when Jesus was criticized, he handled it, but he handled it in love. He didn't get confrontational. He didn't start a fight. When we handle things, when we're criticized, when people lie about us too often, we get confrontational, and we don't just have a conversation. We get big mad and we start a fight over things. And that is not how Jesus handled things. And while it's so nice to have a savior that has also been lied about and been criticized, to know that he can relate to our situation, we also need to remember that Jesus is the example that we are meant to follow in how to handle these things, which is why I used myself and how I mishandled somebody lying about me to give you the other kind of example. We're in Matthew 26, and we're going to read 57 through 68. Then the people who had arrested Jesus led him to the home of Cephas, the high priest, where the teachers of religious law and the elders had gathered. Meanwhile, Peter followed him at a distance and came to a high priest's courtyard. He went in and sat with the guards and waited to see how it would all end. Inside, the leading priests and the entire high council were trying to find witnesses who would lie about Jesus so they could put him to death. But even though they found many who agreed to give false witness, they could not use anyone's testimony. Finally, 2 men came forward who declared, "This man said that I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself?" But Jesus remained silent. Then turning the page, high priest said to him, "I demand in the name of the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus replied, "You have said it. And in the future, you will see the Son of Man seated in the place of power at God's right hand, and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothing to show his horror and said, "Blasphemy! Why do we need other witnesses? You have all heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" "Guilty," they shouted. "He deserves to die." Then they began to spit in Jesus' face and beat him with their fists, and some slapped him, jeering, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah, who hit you that time?" So this is just the beginning of a lot of abuse that Jesus received. And the reason I laughed is that so often they have this depiction of people tearing their clothes, and I honestly can say I've never been so upset I want to tear my shirt off. And I know it's a cultural thing and it means something specific, but because I'm not Jewish, I don't understand. I also grew up with hand-me-downs, so I'm like, I'm not tearing my shirt up for you, sorry. That's a whole you're not worth it conversation, though, that's not going to be had today. But literally you can see that they were pulling people to try to lie. And I just want you to understand that if you've ever had people who were trying to come against you to destroy you, there are times where people are going to pull other people in to try to destroy you, to try to lie about you, to try and say, this is who this person is. This is who this person really is. And it's not going to be true. And I had this happen in my own life while I was working as a custodian, when I had multiple people who didn't like me. And I don't know why they didn't like me. One of them, I had thought we were friends. I had thought that she was actually my friend, and I had never done anything to her, to hurt her, or to cause issues between us. And so I don't know what happened. But suddenly she started going behind my back and lying about me, saying things that weren't true, doing things to try to sabotage me and my job, and then pulling other people in on it. And the other people that she pulled in on it wanted my job as well, like she did. And then there was all this stuff that happened, and it was so hurtful and so confusing, because I had actually been friends. And what you have to realize is that Jesus was friends with Judas, and he was a part of this. He had betrayed Jesus, and Judas was how Jesus ended up being arrested. And granted, this all happened for our salvation's sake, so it had to happen. But Jesus knew what it was like to have people lie about him and to come and make things up. And while it is so hurtful, I think it's fascinating to see how Jesus did not respond to the lies. And if he did respond, he responded with the truth in love. Well, he didn't back down, and he wasn't a coward, and he was maybe not what we would consider nice in our society because he called them out. I think that it is kinder in some ways to call someone out on a lie than to continue to let them lie and spread lies and spread rumors that can hurt people. Because really, truly, when somebody is lying about someone, they are doing a work of hurt on someone. And it is kinder to catch them before that lie can expand and spread. And then they're caught in that lie later on, and it's a bigger deal. In my case, the people that were scheming against me were not caught. It was never... the things that they made up and the things that they were doing were never caught. And the person that was believing them didn't like me anyways and didn't want me there. And that's fine, because I've forgiven that. The only reason I talk about it is to give an example in a more modern time. I wish that I had reacted like Jesus and called it out in love and called it out to my friend and confronted them in love, but I never did. I avoided that person, and when I had things happening, I was not handling it well. Again, I was struggling with PTSD, depression, and suicidal thoughts at the time. Before any of that happened, I was already struggling. And then that happened on top of what was happening to me personally, and it was too much. And I think so often, if we just went to God and we're like, God, I need help, I need wisdom on how to handle this, he would help us, but we don't. And instead we try to handle things ourselves, and we end up mucking it up more than we should. Let's see. We might be done. We're going to check and see what Mark 14 is. No, we're done. So that is all I have today. He was criticized. People spread lies about him. And the reason that I wanted to share this series was to kind of give you a small sample, because there are other scriptures and other things that you can look up and you can see for yourself where Jesus was lied about and where Jesus was criticized in the New Testament. There's a lot of scriptures on it. And I would really like it if you would go through and read that on your own. I wanted to just give you a small sampling today. But I wanted to talk about this because it is so important for us to understand that when we're being criticized, when we're being lied about, we have a God that understands through Jesus Christ, who came to the earth. And God himself understands. As I read through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, as I've read through these with my kids, I want you to understand that, like, God himself has been criticized so much by us as humans that he understands what it is to be criticized. He understands what it is to be lied about. Because how many times have you heard, no, God put this on me to make me learn a lesson? No, he didn't. I had people who, when I was losing my job, would literally say to me, they were attempting to fire me. I eventually quit, but they would say to me, well, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. And I wanted to say, well, let me pray for this blessing for you. I didn't. It was nice. But that was not a blessing from God, because I almost committed suicide over it. Things from God don't cause you to almost commit suicide. Blessings from God don't come wrapped in evil packages. So cancer or sickness or disease or death, things that happen, well, why did God let this happen? God didn't do that. God gives us free will. And if we choose to live outside of him, things are going to happen to us. And it sucks. It really sucks, because a lot of times even good people get sick and die and we wonder why. And I don't have all the answers to that. But I know that God is not the author of those things. I know that the devil roams about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And if he can find a loophole to get into somebody's life and to kill them, to steal them from you, to make you lose faith in God and in his goodness, and make you think that God is a monster, he will. Because if Satan can make God look evil, he's going to do it. But God knows what it's like to have people lie on his character and say that he is the author of sickness and disease when he's not. God knows what it's like to do good things for people and to be criticized. If you read through the Old Testament and read how God brought the Israelites out of Egypt and did all these miraculous things for them, and they criticized him over and over and over again, you'd be like, God, why did you put up with these people? Like, why? But God only put up with those people because Moses stepped in to pray for them. Thank God. But there's so many times where God received criticism and still to this day does. So when you are going through things, remember that you have a God that it knows from his own being blamed and criticized and lied about, and Jesus's being lied about and criticized and blamed for things that they weren't doing wrong. They were in the right. They were doing all the right things So if you're in the right and you're doing all the right things, or if you've sinned and you've fallen short, which is why I used my example of losing my temper over a lie, know that you can go to God and you can say, God, please forgive me for my sin. I jacked up. I have, since that incident, not apologized to that girl because I don't have contact with her anymore. And honestly, I would not contact her again. If I ran into her in person, I would apologize, but because of how much drama she is as a human, I would not invite that back into my life personally. But if I ran into her in person, I would apologize in person. But I have come to God and say, God, I sinned. I should not have lost my temper that way. I should not have said the things that I said. I'm so sorry, and I'm so embarrassed about how I handled that, and I ask you to forgive me. And if the opportunity ever comes to apologize to certain people that I've hurt or done things to or done wrong things to apologize, I will apologize. And if you've ever met me and I have hurt you or sinned against you, you know that I will apologize. Because I actually am a nice person, even if it takes me a second. But I have gone through so many things where nobody apologized to me. There are certain incidences in my life that I can think of very clearly where people believed lies about me, and so they said things to me that they shouldn't, or said things about me that they shouldn't have. And I've never received apologies for those things. And that's okay. But because I know what it is to have people lie about me and to not receive apologies, when I have failed in some aspect and I've realized that I've failed, I will go and I will say, I'm sorry, I failed. I believed something about you that I shouldn't have, or I lost my temper with you. Or I lied unintentionally. I never lie purposefully about somebody, but I have believed things that weren't true and repeated them. And I will be honest and say, I heard this thing about you and I was talking about it with so-and-so, and I'm sorry I talked about it because I've met you since then and know that it's not true. I have a friend that I did that with, actually, because before I met her, I'd heard lots of things about her that weren't true, and then apologized to her when she told me what was true and what wasn't true. But we need to, whether we have been lied about or we've done the lying, go to God and say, God, I didn't handle this right. I'm sorry. If you did handle it right, awesome. If you don't know how to handle it because it's currently happening to you, go to God and say, God, I don't know how to handle this criticism that I'm receiving. Is this valid criticism, or is this just somebody wanting me to be more like them when you didn't call me to be them? Or how do I handle this person lying about me? There's a person that's in my life that has lied about me and said things that weren't true, and they're a part of my life and they're not going anywhere. Actually, there's a few people like that. But they are permanent fixtures that cannot go anywhere. I can't just, we're done. Wow, now that I think about it, there's a lot more than I thought before. Anyways. Life. But the way that I've decided to handle that is, I forgive you. I'm going to walk in love with you. And while I'm never expecting you to apologize or to treat me better, as long as you treat certain people that we are mutually connected with okay, that's fine. I can handle how you treat me. And that has saved me a lot of pain and suffering and grief, because I've just not necessarily accepted, but realized that, like, there are other things more important than my feelings in this situation. And I think that's something that a lot of times we don't realize, is that, like, and I'm not saying in an abusive situation. In an abusive situation, you need to remove people from your life. Because God does not want us to be abused or be doormats. But if it's not an abusive situation and it's just a situation that you're like, this sucks and I don't want to deal with this. And God says, too bad, suck it up, buttercup. They're going to be in your life and you need to put your big girl panties on. Put your big girl panties on and deal with it. Walk in love. Be like Jesus. Be the example of Christ in their life, because maybe there is no other example of Christ in their life. And realize that some things are more important than your comfort and your feelings. So often, we have a hard time realizing that something is more important than our comfort and our feelings, because we are such a lazy generation of human beings that has become so much about us and ourselves and self-care and a lot of other things that really just turn us into narcissists that are only involved with ourselves and only care about ourselves. And really, we need to be like, okay, this person lied about me, but they're not going anywhere. I can't remove this person from my life, no matter how much I wish I could. I am stuck with this person. So God, how do I forgive and walk in love? And go to God and he will give you wisdom. Or this person, all they do is criticize me, but they don't have a leg to stand on because I've seen how they live their life, Lord. How do I deal with this thing? And God will give you wisdom. And I am speaking from experience here. I have had so many people criticize me and my parenting or my life. And I have seen how they live their life and seen how their children are drug addicts and doing things that are disgusting and not good, and then received their criticism about my parenting. And it's like, I've seen your kids. And I don't say that out loud, but I'm just saying we all are going to experience this thing where people will criticize something we're doing. And you look at their life and you're like, you are a hypocrite. And you as a Christian are called to walk in love. So God is not going to let you get away with being unkind and being like, you hypocrite, blah, 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 blah. No, God's going to call you to do the bigger thing, the higher thing, and to walk in love. And so when these people criticize me, what I have to remind myself is that, like, I'm parenting the way that God has called me to parent my kids. Every child is different and needs to be parented differently. And that no matter what somebody thinks about my kids and how I parent them, at the end of the day, my kids are kind, my kids are caring, my kids are healthy, my kids are clothed, my kids are provided for. When people criticize you, you're going to say, I can see your life. I'm not blind. But that doesn't mean that you get to go and then criticize them back. We are called to walk in love. So instead of criticizing back, ask God, God, how do I handle this situation? Because I'm not going to lie, most of us are going to be like, God, I want to pop off. I want to mouth off. I want to snap back. I want to clap back. Whatever your phrasing of your generation would be. Or if you've got big temper issues like I once had, you might be like, I want to swing. I am ready to swing, because I'm not going to lie. As a teenager, I had a big temper. And I think that God has a great sense of humor because he put all that temper in a 5'3" body. But we need to be honest and be like, God, I, in my flesh, want to handle this wrong. How did Jesus handle these things? How would Jesus handle these things? What is the right way to handle this? Anyways, I pray that this helps somebody. I pray that you have a blessed day. I know this was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but I did 2 in 1 because I haven't been on here in a minute, and I did do this before, but I wanted to do it again without the distraction of kittens in the background, because my daughter's her brand new kitten was in the background causing havoc. But I hope that you have a blessed day. I hope that this helps somebody. I know for me that going through the things that I was going through, it helped me so much to understand that God had been criticized, that Jesus had been criticized, that they had been lied about, that I wasn't alone in this, because I think so often we're like, God, you don't know how this feels. We're very much like that teenager that like, nobody understands me. And we have a God who does. We have a God who can relate, who can understand. I'm sorry, that was so dramatic. But we have a God who gets it. And it's so important that we know that he gets it, because then we understand that if we go to him, he gets it, and he is going to give us the answers that we need because he loves us. And he's like, I understand, but I've still called you to do better than what they're doing. I've still called you to higher things. I've still called you to walk in love. And if you obey me, I am going to give you victory over these things. I'm going to bring you out on the other side, and you are going to shine. And that's the thing we have to remind ourselves, that if we are not troubled, if we cast our care, if we do not let our hearts be troubled, we don't get upset, we don't walk in sin or walk out of love and into sin, if we can just, Father God, forgive me for how I'm feeling, and forgive me for my internal sin, or if you have sinned like me, forgive me for saying the wrong things. Help me to do right. Like, God will meet us there. He is so ready to help us, and all we have to do is ask. And that's the hard thing, is that so often we don't ask. And he's like, I'm here when you need me. He's the coach on the sideline that you never let coach you. And if you would just tap that man in, if you would just tap Jesus in, if you would just tap the Lord in and let them help coach you. They're sitting on the sidelines just waiting. But God is a perfect gentleman. He's never just going to butt in. So I hope that this helps someone. I hope that you have a blessed day. And I pray that God helps you and gives you the wisdom that you need. God bless.